Alright, people, there's a war coming. And I'm not talking about Game of Thrones, although there is a war coming in Game of Thrones, and I'm really looking forward to that too. But nah, I'm talking about the war for the Planet of the Apes. And I'm really looking forward to it, man. Hopefully it'll be awesome and cap off a solid trilogy. So why not just talk about the movies leading up to it? Rise of the Planet of the Apes. So Rise of the Planet of the Apes is a prequel slash reboot of the Planet of the Apes franchise. You know, the old 1968 Charlton Heston film, which I'll be honest, I've seen the first one like once years ago, and I haven't really seen any of the other ones because I heard they were crap, nor have I seen the Tim Burton remake, which I also heard was crap, but I've seen the first one and I've seen these prequel reboots, and they're pretty damn good. So in Rise of the Planet of the Apes, the main human character is Will, played by James Franco. He's a scientist working for a company called Genesis. He's trying to come up with a cure for Alzheimer's, because his dad, played by John Lithgow, is suffering from Alzheimer's. So he has this drug called ALZ-112, he tests it on chimpanzees, and then shit hits the fan, the experiment gets shut down, he ends up having to take care of this little baby chimpanzee he named Caesar, the mother of whom was tested on with this drug, so the genetics passed down and now Caesar is super smart. That's the effect the drug had on the apes, it heightened their intelligence. So I guess since Caesar was actually born with the drug inside him, he's just more smart. And it's really cool to see. First of all, I really like the characters. They're not the most fleshed out or developed, but they were acted very well, especially James Franco, who you can tell his situation is kind of a pickle because he's taking care of this ape who he's really attached to, but you know, the world is not used to people having apes for pets, especially really smart ones. But you really do feel the bond between him and Caesar, and him and Frida Pinto from Slumdog Millionaire, who is really hot. But of course, the main character in this film is Andy Serkis as Caesar. Andy Serkis doing the mocap for Caesar, first of all, was a genius casting choice, since Andy Serkis is pretty much the king of motion capture. If you somehow don't know that, then why have you never watched Lord of the Rings yet? But anyways, yeah, Caesar is a straight up badass. There's a point in the movie where he causes some conflict at home, so he has to be taken to this like ape care center place, and there we get to see that Tom Felton is pretty much playing Draco Malfoy here, but just the American version, because he is a douche. I'm serious, man. I cannot blame James Franco for just wanting to punch the guy in the face, because I'd do the exact same thing. He's spraying Caesar with a hose and shit and running that taser thing across the fence, and Caesar's not liking that, and you can tell like he's thinking it out in his head. He's like, yeah, alright, I gotta do something about this. So when he's with these other apes, he meets this orangutan named Maurice, who is a circus orangutan, so he knows how to sign. That's how Caesar communicates, through sign language. I don't know the first thing about sign language, I'm just doing this shit. But together they hatch a plan to break out, and conflict ensues from there. And it's awesome, man. The first like half of this film is all build up, you know, it's a science part, which you're really into because you're getting into the characters and the lore and all that. You're like, alright, discovering how Caesar is smart, which is pretty important to know when it comes to the whole bigger story of the Planet of the Apes. And then about halfway through, when we're in the ape care center, things start to go from like a learning movie to a, okay, we're breaking out. It's almost a prison break. And then the conflict between apes and humans really begins. This is where the action comes in, and it's actually pretty exciting. The visual effects are actually kind of funny because when this film first came out, everyone was just gushing over how good the visual effects in this film were. But now that it's been a few years since this film came out, I look back and I watched this film just a couple hours ago, and I was like, yeah, alright, I have seen better visual effects since this movie came out. I have to stress, they don't look bad, but, you know, they just don't look as good as, you know, Dawn of the Planet of the Apes, for example. But man, when these apes break out and just start wreaking havoc in the neighborhood, they're in San Francisco. There's actually some kind of scary shit in there. It's not a horror movie, but it kind of felt like a horror movie in some aspects where I got legitimately scared of these apes. Like, there's a scene where there's this big, you know, conflict on the Golden Gate Bridge, and there's a guy in a helicopter and he's gonna fall off, and one ape comes up to him, he gives him this really shit-eating grin, and then just pushes him off the bridge, and that is like the scariest thing ever. Because you can tell this ape is like, yeah, fuck humans. That's Koba, you know? Koba's not good news. We'll get to that in the next movie. And of course, there is the one big scene that is like the big spoiler in this film, the one scene that is like, holy shit, that just happened. I'm not gonna tell you about it because you know what I'm talking about if you've seen the movie. If you haven't, go watch it because it's a really good movie. It is the scene you remember from the film when you walk out of the theater. So Rise of the Planet of the Apes is a great movie about social conflict, how to care for people, you know, your family and your friends. The big lesson I take away from this film is, hey, don't be a dick, because you might just get electrocuted to death. The score for this film was done by Patrick Doyle, who scored Harry Potter and the Goblet of Fire, which is my favorite Harry Potter movie. And it's actually kind of a mixed bag because there are some moments in this film where the music is really good. Like the very last scene in this movie, that music is great. But there are some other scenes in the film where I was like, yeah, the score is actually getting kind of annoying because it's just repeating the same thing over and over. Like when they're on the bridge and there's that like one motif going off, I'm like, alright, I get it. Can we move on to another melody or something? And when the movie is over, you kind of want to stick around because there is a little mid-credit scene followed by this like graphic of something happening, and it's what leads into the next movie, and it's really scary. Again, I'm not gonna say what it is. It actually took me a couple of watches to really understand what was going on there, but yeah, it's some pretty horrifying shit, really. So Rise of the Planet of the Apes, great characters, great visual effects, although they could be cleaned up a little bit, and awesome story. It's a great origin for the franchise that they're doing now. It is less than 2 hours long, I think. I could go for it being maybe a little longer, but in the end, I really have no complaints about the film. So Rise of the Planet of the Apes, have you seen it? What did you think about it? Have you watched it recently? And how does it rank among these Apes movies for you? Whatever you think, go ahead and leave a comment. And don't forget to subscribe.